Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead and squinted at the rocky outcrop in front of him. The Arizona desert stretched endlessly in every direction, a sea of red sand and jagged stones baking under the afternoon sun. He had been out here for 3 days, collecting rock samples and mapping mineral deposits for the university. It was lonely work, but Jake preferred it that way. Rocks didn't talk back, didn't complicate things, and always made sense. He tossed another sample into the back of his Rover and climbed into the driver's seat. The vehicle was old, covered in dents and scratches from years of rough terrain. The air conditioning barely worked, and the radio only picked up static this far from civilization. But it was reliable, and that was all Jake needed. He started the engine and began driving toward his next survey point, following the GPS coordinates on his cracked tablet. The Rover bounced over the uneven ground, kicking up clouds of dust behind it. Jake was thinking about dinner, probably another can of beans heated over his camping stove, when something caught his eye. A streak of silver flashed across the sky, moving impossibly fast. Jake slowed the Rover, craning his neck to watch. It wasn't a plane. It wasn't a meteor either. The object was changing direction, zigzagging through the air like it was trying to dodge something. Then he saw why. 3 smaller objects were chasing it, firing bright bolts of energy that left glowing trails in the air. Jake's heart started pounding. This wasn't normal. This wasn't anything he had ever seen before. He grabbed his radio, but before he could call anyone, the silver object suddenly dropped out of the sky. It was coming straight at him. He had maybe 2 seconds to realize what was about to happen. Jake threw himself sideways, tumbling out of the Rover just as the silver craft slammed into it. The impact was deafening. Metal screamed and glass shattered. Both vehicles spun across the desert in a tangle of debris, throwing up a massive cloud of sand and smoke. Jake landed hard on his shoulder and rolled several times before coming to a stop. His ears were ringing and his whole body ached. For a moment, he just lay there trying to remember how to breathe. Then anger kicked in. Someone had just destroyed his Rover, his only way back to civilization, his home for the past 3 days. He pushed himself to his feet, coughing on the dust, and staggered toward the wreckage. The silver craft was embedded in what was left of his Rover. It was sleek and elegant, covered in strange symbols that seemed to shimmer and change in the light. Part of it was still glowing hot from the crash. A hatch on the side of the craft suddenly hissed open. Jake took a step back, his hand instinctively reaching for the knife on his belt. A figure emerged from the smoke, tall and graceful despite the rough landing. It was a woman, or at least something that looked like a woman. She wore armor that looked like it was made of liquid metal, flowing and reforming around her body. Her hair was long and dark with streaks of silver running through it. But what caught Jake's attention were her eyes. They were violet, bright and intense, and they were looking right at him. She stumbled out of the craft, one hand pressed to her side. There was a cut on her forehead, and purple blood was running down her face. She looked at Jake, then at the tactical vest he was wearing, loaded with tools and sample containers. Her eyes widened with what looked like relief. "Thank the stars," she said in perfect English, though her accent was strange, musical. "I have found a commander." Jake blinked. "What?" "No, I'm not." She grabbed his hand with surprising strength. Her skin was warm, almost hot. "There is no time for modesty, Commander. I am Celestara Vex, Queen of the Vex Empire. I require your assistance immediately." "Lady, I don't know what you're talking about," Jake said, trying to pull his hand free. "You just crashed into my Rover. Do you have any idea how far we are from—" "Your tactical equipment is impressive," Celestara continued, ignoring him. She was looking at his vest with approval. "And your vehicle was clearly designed for combat situations. I apologize for the collision, Honey Commander, but I was under attack." "Honey, what?" Jake managed to get his hand free. "Look, I'm a geologist. That's not tactical equipment. Those are rock hammers and sample bags. And that Rover was just an old truck with big tires." Celestara smiled at him, a dazzling smile that made her whole face light up despite the blood and dirt. "Your humility is admirable, Commander. But I saw how you ejected from your vehicle at precisely the right moment to avoid injury. That was expert-level evasion." "I fell out," Jake said flatly. "I panicked and fell out." Before Celestara could respond, her silver craft suddenly exploded. The blast knocked them both off their feet. Jake's ears rang again as flames shot into the sky. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing left but twisted metal and burning debris. Celestara pushed herself up, looking at the wreckage with dismay. Then she looked at the sky. Jake followed her gaze and felt his stomach drop. 3 ships were descending through the clouds, dark and angular, like mechanical birds of prey. They were spreading out, clearly searching for something. "The assassins," Celestara said quietly. "They tracked my escape pod signature. We must move now." She grabbed Jake's hand again and started pulling him away from the wreckage. Jake wanted to protest, wanted to demand explanations, wanted to wake up from whatever insane dream this was. But those ships looked real. The burning wreckage was real. And the woman pulling him across the desert with desperate urgency was definitely real. "There," Jake heard himself say, pointing toward a rocky ridge in the distance. "There's a cave system over there. I mapped it 2 days ago." Celestara looked at him with admiration. "You have already scouted defensive positions in this area." "Excellent tactical planning, Honey Commander." "That's not my name," Jake said as they ran. "And I wasn't planning anything. I was just doing geological surveys." "Your cover story is very thorough," Celestara said approvingly. "You will have to teach me your methods." Jake wanted to argue, but he was too busy running and trying not to trip over rocks. Behind them, he could hear the whine of engines as the hunter ships began their search pattern. Energy weapons fired in the distance, scanning the ground. They were getting closer. They reached the ridge just as one of the ships spotted them. A bolt of green energy hit the ground behind them, vaporizing sand and turning rock into glass. Jake didn't think. He grabbed Celestara and pulled her into the narrow opening of the cave, both of them sliding down a steep slope into darkness. They tumbled together for several feet before landing in a wider chamber. Jake's flashlight had stayed attached to his vest and he fumbled it on. The beam revealed a network of passages stretching deeper into the rock. Celestara was pressed against him in the cramped space. She was breathing hard and he could feel her heart racing, or maybe that was his own heart. Probably both. "That was incredible, Commander," she whispered. "You brought us directly to a prepared defensive position." "It's just a cave," Jake whispered back. "And my name is Jake Morrison. Not Commander anything." She smiled at him in the flashlight beam. Her face was very close to his. "As you wish, Honey Commander Jake Morrison. I shall use your full title." Jake closed his eyes and wondered what he had done to deserve this. His rover was destroyed. He was trapped in a cave with an alien queen, who thought he was some kind of military genius. And there were ships outside trying to kill them both. It was definitely not going to be beans for dinner tonight. Outside, the hunter ships continued their search, their weapons lighting up the desert like deadly fireworks. And in the cave, Jake Morrison, geologist and accidental commander, tried to figure out how to keep them both alive until anyone came to rescue them, assuming rescue was even possible anymore. Jake led them deeper into the cave system, using his flashlight to navigate the narrow passages. He had explored these caves during his survey 2 days ago, looking for mineral deposits. Now he was grateful for that boredom-driven exploration. The passages twisted and turned, going deeper into the ridge. Behind them he could hear the muffled sounds of the hunter ships scanning the area. Celestara stayed close, one hand on his shoulder. She moved quietly for someone wearing metal armor. Jake noticed she was limping slightly, favoring her left leg. The cut on her forehead had stopped bleeding, but she looked pale even in the dim light. After about 10 minutes of careful walking, they reached a larger chamber. Jake had eaten lunch here 2 days ago. There was a flat area perfect for sitting, and a crack in the ceiling that let in a thin beam of sunlight. More importantly, there was a small pool of water collected in a depression in the rock. "We can rest here," Jake said, setting down his pack. "They won't find us this deep in the cave system. Their scanners probably can't penetrate this much rock." Celestara sat down carefully, wincing as she moved. "Your knowledge of defensive geology is impressive, Commander Jake. This position offers water, natural fortification, and limited access points. You selected it well." "I ate a sandwich here on Tuesday," Jake said, pulling out his first aid kit. "That's it. No strategic planning involved." He knelt beside her and examined the cut on her forehead. It looked worse than it was, mostly cleaned up by her violet blood, but her armor had a crack along the ribs, and he could see bruising underneath. "You're hurt," he said. "It is nothing," Celestara replied, but she didn't pull away when he cleaned the cut with antiseptic wipe. "I have survived much worse in the court wars." "Court wars?" "Political disputes," she said with a slight smile, "though sometimes they become quite literal. 3 assassination attempts this year alone. This was the 4th. Jake paused in his cleaning. "Someone keeps trying to kill you?" I rule 300 worlds, Commander Jake. Many parties would benefit from my death. She said it casually, like she was discussing the weather. The Zrath Collective, the rebel factions in the outer systems, even some of my own council members who prefer a more malleable ruler. That sounds terrible, Jake said honestly. Celestara looked at him with surprise. You do not tell me it is the burden of leadership? Or that I should simply eliminate my enemies? I was going to say you should get better security, Jake muttered, applying a bandage to her forehead. 4 attempts in 1 year is pretty bad, she laughed. It was a genuine sound, warm and unguarded. I like you, honey commander. You speak plainly. Why do you keep calling me that? Honey is a term of affection on your world, yes? I learned many Earth customs during our cultural studies. And you are clearly a commander, despite your modest protests. Jake sat back and looked at her seriously. I'm really not. I studied rocks in college. I have a doctorate in geology. I spend my days alone in the desert, collecting samples and making maps. I've never been in the military. I've never commanded anything except maybe a pizza delivery once. Celestara studied his face in the dim light. For a moment, Jake thought she might actually believe him. Then she reached out and touched his vest. You carry multiple tools, each with a specific purpose. You maintain them carefully. I can see the wear patterns. You plan for various scenarios, pack supplies efficiently. You knew this cave system existed and led us here without hesitation under fire. Because I was here 2 days ago, Jake said. I literally ate lunch in this exact spot. Advanced reconnaissance, Celestara nodded. Very thorough. Jake put his face in his hands. You're not going to believe me, are you? I believe you are exactly what you appear to be, she said gently. A careful, intelligent commander who prefers to work alone. There is no shame in that. Some of the greatest military minds in my empire are reclusive scholars. Before Jake could argue further, a sound echoed through the cave. It was distant but distinct. Footsteps. Heavy ones. Celestara's hand went to her side, where a weapon had been holstered. The holster was empty now, lost in the crash. Jake quickly turned off his flashlight, plunging them into darkness except for the thin beam of sunlight from above. They waited in silence. Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Celestara's breathing was steady beside him, controlled. The footsteps came closer along with clicking sounds and guttural voices speaking in a language Jake didn't recognize. Hunter soldiers. Celestara whispered directly into his ear. They have entered the cave system. Their armor is heavily shielded, designed for assault operations. How many? Jake whispered back. I count 3 distinct movement patterns. Likely a scout team, Jake thought quickly. The passage they had come through was narrow. Very narrow. He remembered having to turn sideways in one spot to squeeze through. Their armor is bulky. Very, why? Follow me quietly. Jake led them away from the chamber, deeper into the cave system. He moved slowly, carefully remembering the route from his earlier exploration. Behind them, the footsteps entered the chamber they had just left. Harsh light swept the area. The passage Jake chose got narrower and narrower. Soon they were moving sideways, their backs against one wall. Celestara's armor scraped against the rock, and she had to angle herself carefully. The passage turned sharply, then opened into a small grotto. They heard frustrated growls behind them. The hunter soldiers had reached the narrow passage. From the sounds of it, they couldn't fit through with their armor on. One of them fired a weapon, and energy crackled through the passage, but it was too narrow for the beam to travel straight. It hit the walls and dissipated. Jake and Celestara kept moving. The grotto had 3 exits, and Jake chose the one that angled downward. It was a tight fit, almost like a natural slide. They descended carefully, using their hands and feet to control the descent. They emerged in a lower chamber with multiple passages. Jake had no idea which one led where. He had only explored the upper levels during his survey. We have bought time, Celestara said, but they will find another route, and they will call for support. Then we keep moving, Jake said. These caves probably connect to other ridge systems. If we can get far enough away, we can surface at a different location. Celestara looked at him with open admiration, using natural terrain to maximize defensive advantage while maintaining mobility options. Textbook tactical withdrawal, honey commander. It's called running away, Jake said. I'm just making sure we don't run into a dead end while we do it. They moved through the caves for another hour, always going deeper when they heard sounds above. Jake marked their path with small rock cairns. an old geological habit that now served as breadcrumbs in case they needed to backtrack. Eventually, they reached a chamber with an underground stream. The water was clear and cold, flowing through a crack in the floor and disappearing into darkness. Celestara knelt beside it and drank deeply. Jake did the same, grateful for the fresh water. "We should rest," Jake said. "Just for a few minutes. You're hurt and we've been moving for a long time." Celestara nodded and sat down against the wall. Jake sat beside her, their shoulders touching in the confined space. He could feel her trembling slightly, either from pain or exhaustion or both. "Thank you, Commander Jake," she said quietly. "I would likely be dead now if you had not helped me." "You crashed into my rover," Jake pointed out. "It seemed rude not to help after that." She laughed softly. "Still, you could have run. Left me to my fate. Most people would have." "Most people aren't being chased by alien assassins," Jake said. "I'm pretty sure running wouldn't help much in that situation." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Celestara spoke again, her voice softer. "I must confess something, honey commander. I am frightened." Jake looked at her in surprise. "You are?" "I have been queen for 7 years. I have faced council coups, fleet mutinies, and diplomatic crises that nearly started wars. But I've always had my ship, my guards, my advisors. Now I have none of that. Just this cave and a commander who insists he is a geologist." She smiled slightly. "It is quite humbling." "For what it's worth," Jake said, "you're handling it better than I would. I'm pretty much in panic mode, just moving on automatic." "That is called maintaining composure under pressure," Celestara said. "It is a command trait." Jake gave up arguing. Instead, he asked, "Why were you on Earth anyway? Don't queens usually have, I don't know, lots of security?" "I was traveling to a diplomatic summit on the moon Io. We were ambushed in orbit. My guards bought me time to reach an escape pod. I headed for Earth because it is a protected world. Your planet has observer status with the Galactic Council. The assassins should not have pursued me here." Her expression darkened. "The fact that they did suggest this conspiracy goes deeper than I thought." "How deep are we talking?" "Deep enough that someone powerful is willing to violate major treaties to see me dead." She looked at Jake. "Which means when we survive this, Commander Jake, you will likely be drawn into galactic politics whether you wish it or not. I am sorry for that." "When we survive this?" Jake echoed. "Not if?" Celestara smiled. "I have faith in your abilities, honey commander. You have kept us alive this far. I trust you will continue to do so." Jake wanted to protest that he was just making it up as he went along. They emerged from the caves at sunset. 3 miles from where they had entered, Jake had followed the underground stream, reasoning that it had to surface somewhere. They came out through a narrow gap between rocks into the cooling desert air. Celestara breathed deeply, looking at the orange and purple sky. "Your planet has beautiful sunsets." "It's the dust in the atmosphere," Jake said automatically. "Scatters the light in specific wavelengths." She smiled at him. "Even now you maintain your cover as a scientist. Admirable dedication, honey commander." Jake had stopped arguing about that hours ago. He checked their surroundings carefully. They were in a different part of the desert, rockier and more elevated. In the distance he could see lights. Probably the small town of Crater Ridge, population maybe 200 on a good day. "We need supplies," Jake said, checking his pack. "Water, food, and some way to contact someone who can help." "My people will be searching for me," Celestara said. "But it may take time. The Empire is vast, and without my ship's beacon, they will have to search many possible locations." "How long are we talking?" "Days, perhaps a week," Jake did the math. They had maybe a day's worth of water between them, and he had 2 energy bars in his pack. That wasn't going to last a week. "Then we need to reach that town. I have friends there. We can get help. Is it safe?" "The assassins may be watching population centers." "It's barely a population center," Jake said. "It's mostly just an old mining town that refuses to die. My friend Danny runs a general store there. He's got a ham radio setup that can reach the authorities." They started walking as the sun finished setting. The desert cooled quickly at night, and Jake was glad he had his jacket. Celestara's armor seemed to regulate her temperature automatically, which was convenient. She was still limping, though, and Jake could see she was in pain. "Let me look at that leg," he said, calling a halt after an hour of walking. Celestara sat on a rock, and Jake examined her armor. The crack along her ribs extended down to her thigh. Underneath, her skin was badly bruised, turning shades of purple and blue that were darker than her normal complexion. This needs proper medical attention, Jake said. I will survive, Celestara replied. We must reach safety first. You need to rest more frequently. We'll stop every hour. That will slow us down. You collapsing from pain will slow us down more, Jake pointed out. We go at a sustainable pace or we don't go at all. Celestara studied him, then nodded. As you command. They continued walking, and Jake found himself telling her about his work to fill the silence. He explained how he tracked mineral deposits, how different rocks formed, how you could read the history of the planet in layers of stone. Celestara listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she was actually paying attention. On my homeworld we have singing crystals, she said. They grow in caves and resonate at different frequencies. We use them for meditation and communication. Your geology would find them fascinating, I think. Your geology? Jake said, catching the phrasing. You, Commander Jake Morrison. Your geologist self. She smiled. I honor both aspects of who you are. They walked through the night, stopping regularly to rest. Jake shared one of his energy bars with Celestara, breaking it in half. She ate it curiously, declaring it dense but efficient. During one rest stop, she asked him about his life. There's not much to tell, Jake said, sitting on a flat rock and looking at the stars. They were incredibly bright out here, far from any city lights. I grew up in Colorado. Went to college, got my doctorate, took this job because it let me work alone. No complications, no drama, just me and the rocks. That sounds lonely, Celestara said softly. It's peaceful, Jake corrected. People are complicated. They have agendas and emotions and expectations. Rocks are straightforward. They tell you their story if you know how to read them. And you prefer stories from stones to stories from people? Jake thought about that. I used to. Now I'm not so sure. Celestara moved closer to him on the rock. They sat shoulder to shoulder, looking at the stars. I understand loneliness, Commander Jake. I am surrounded by thousands of people every day. Advisors, guards, courtiers, diplomats. But none of them see me. They see the Queen. The position. The power. Not Celestara. That does sound lonely, Jake admitted. You see me, she said quietly, even while insisting I am wrong about you. You see the person, not the title. That is rare in my experience. Jake didn't know what to say to that, so instead he pointed at the sky. That's actually not a star. That's Jupiter. See how it doesn't twinkle? Planets reflect steady light. Stars twinkle because their light is distorted by atmosphere. Tell me more, Celestara said, and she didn't sound like a queen giving a command. She sounded like someone who just wanted to hear him talk. So Jake told her about the planets, about the constellations, about how humans had looked at these same stars for thousands of years and told stories. Celestara listened and occasionally pointed out stars that were part of her empire, so distant that even with her technology, travel took weeks. They started walking again as a meteor shower began, streaks of light cutting across the sky. Celestara watched them with wonder, and Jake felt a strange warmth in his chest. She was a queen who ruled 300 worlds, but right now she was just a woman enjoying a simple meteor shower. Around midnight, they heard engines in the distance. Jake pulled Celestara down behind a large rock formation. 3 vehicles drove past on a dirt road about half a mile away. They weren't normal trucks. These were alien craft hovering a few feet off the ground, scanning with searchlights. They are expanding their search pattern, Celestara whispered. We must assume they are watching the town as well. Then we find another way, Jake said, thinking. There's an old mining complex about 2 miles west of the town, abandoned for years. It might have supplies, and there's equipment there that I can use to rig a communication device. You can build a transmitter from mining equipment? I can try. I'm pretty good with electronics, he paused. That's actually true, not part of any imaginary commander training. I really am good with electronics, Celestara smiled. I believe you, honey commander. They changed direction, heading toward the mining complex. It took them until dawn to reach it. The buildings were falling apart, but the main structure was still standing. Jake remembered this place from his childhood. His father had worked here before the mine closed down. They entered carefully, checking for any signs of the hunter soldiers. The place was empty, just dust and old equipment. Jake found the maintenance shed and started looking through the tools and parts. Can you keep watch? He asked Celestara. Let me know if you see anything moving outside. Of course. She positioned herself by a window with a clear view of the surrounding area. Jake worked for hours pulling apart old radios, circuit boards, and power supplies. He wasn't entirely sure what he was doing, working mostly from half-remembered college courses and YouTube videos he had watched out of curiosity. But slowly, a plan came together. Celestera watched him work, occasionally reporting on the hunter patrols she could see in the distance. At one point she asked, "Did they teach you this in command school?" "They taught me this in freshman physics," Jake said, soldering wires. "And a lot of trial and error late at night in my dorm room." "You are remarkable," Celestera said, "building a functional transmitter from abandoned equipment. Most commanders would never attempt such a thing. Most commanders would have actual military training and equipment," Jake pointed out. "I'm just improvising." Improvisation is the mark of true tactical genius. Jake decided to take that as a compliment. He kept working, and around midday he had something that might work. It was ugly, a mess of wires and components held together with electrical tape and hope. But when he powered it on, it hummed to life. "Now I just need to get enough altitude for the signal to reach," Jake said. He looked at Celestara. "How are you feeling?"
"Can you climb?"
"I can do what is necessary," she said, though he could see the exhaustion on her face. They made their way to the old water tower behind the mining office. It was rusty and probably not safe, but it was tall. Jake climbed up first, testing each rung carefully. Then he helped Celestera up, pulling her onto the platform at the top. The view was incredible. They could see for miles in every direction. The town in the distance, the desert stretching away, the rocky ridges where they had hidden in caves, and in several directions, they could see the hunter patrols, small dark shapes moving methodically across the landscape. Jake set up his makeshift transmitter and began broadcasting on emergency frequencies. He kept the message simple, their location, that they needed help, that there were hostile forces in the area. While he broadcast, Celestara suddenly stiffened. "Commander Jake, look up." Jake looked and felt his heart sink. 3 hunter ships were approaching, moving in formation. They had detected the transmission. "We need to go," Jake said, but Celestara shook her head. "They are too fast. We cannot outrun them." She looked at him, and there was something fierce in her violet eyes. "Get down from the tower. Hide in the building." "What?" "No, what are you going to do?" "I am going to buy you time." She touched his face gently. "You have kept me alive, honey commander. You have shown me kindness when you had no reason to. Now let me protect you." The hunter ships opened fire before Jake reached Celestara. Energy bolts tore into the ground, vaporizing sand and rock. Celestara dodged with impressive speed despite her injuries, but Jake could see she was tiring. He did the only thing he could think of. He threw the pipe at the nearest ship as hard as he could. It was a terrible throw. The pipe went maybe 20 feet and clattered uselessly to the ground, but it got their attention. One of the ships turned toward him, its weapons charging with an ominous whine. Celestara moved faster than Jake thought possible. She tackled him, and they rolled behind a pile of old mining equipment just as energy bolts destroyed the spot where he had been standing. The heat from the blasts washed over them, and Jake could smell burning metal. "What are you doing?" Celestara demanded, though she sounded more amazed than angry. "I told you to hide." "I don't take orders well," Jake gasped. "Even from queens." She stared at him for a moment, then laughed, a bright sound despite the danger. "You're either very brave or very foolish, honey commander." "Probably both," Jake admitted. He looked around desperately. They were pinned down, and the ships were moving to surround them. "We need a plan." "I am open to suggestions." Jake's mind raced. They were in a mining complex. There had to be something they could use. His eyes fell on a shed marked with faded warning signs. "Explosive storage. Can your armor protect you from explosions?" he asked, to a degree. "Why?" "Because I have a very bad idea," Jake explained quickly. Celestara listened, her eyes widening. "That is indeed a very bad idea, Commander Jake. It might also work." They moved together, staying low and using the equipment as cover. The hunter ships were firing systematically, destroying their hiding spots one by one. Jake reached the explosives shed and kicked the door open. Inside were old blasting charges, the kind used to break through rock. The expiration dates were years old, but Jake hoped they would still work. He grabbed several charges in the detonator box, then rejoined Celestara. "How strong is that armor of yours?" "Strong enough," she said, "though I would prefer not to test its limits." "You're about to." Jake planted the charges in strategic locations around the mining complex, using his knowledge of geology to place them where they would cause the most structural damage. The hunter ships were closing in, their weapons warming up for a final attack. "When I trigger this, run for that gully," Jake told Celestera, pointing to a dried creek bed about 50 yards away. "Don't stop, don't look back. What about you?" "I'll be right behind you, promise." Celestera hesitated, then nodded. She touched his face again, a quick, gentle gesture. "Survive this, Commander Jake. That is an order." "Yes, ma'am." Jake waited until the ships were in perfect position, hovering over the complex, their sensors focused on tracking him and Celestera. Then he triggered the detonator. The explosions were massive. The charges brought down the water tower, collapsed buildings, and sent shrapnel flying in every direction. But Jake had placed them carefully. The blast created a directed force, catching all 3 hunter ships in the destruction. One ship was hit directly by falling debris and crashed into the ground. Another spun out of control, its engines damaged, and limped away trailing smoke. The 3rd ship managed to pull up, but Jake had one more surprise. He had placed a charge under an old fuel tank, and when it exploded, it sent a fireball into the sky that caught the ship's underside. The ship wobbled, struggled to maintain altitude, then crashed in the desert half a mile away. Jake ran for the gully where Celestera was waiting. He dove in just as secondary explosions rocked the mining complex. They huddled together while debris rained down around them, chunks of metal and rock bouncing off the gully's edges. When the noise finally stopped, Jake cautiously looked up. The mining complex was gone, replaced by a smoking crater. The 3 hunter ships were destroyed or disabled, and they were alive. "That worked better than it should have," Jake said, surprised. Celestera was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You used demolition tactics to turn their numerical advantage against them. You calculated blast radius, structural weak points, and timing with precision, and you did it in under 5 minutes. I just blew up a building," Jake protested. "It's not that impressive." "It is exactly that impressive," Celestera said. Then she pulled him close and kissed him. Jake froze in surprise for half a second, then kissed her back. It was brief, just a few seconds, but when they pulled apart, something had shifted between them. Something had become real. "Your Majesty," a new voice called out, and they both jumped apart like guilty teenagers. A massive ship was descending from the sky, sleek and silver, covered in symbols similar to those on Celestera's escape pod. It was easily the size of a football stadium, and it moved with silent grace. Smaller ships peeled off from it, securing the area. "My fleet," Celestera said, relief and something else in her voice, something that sounded like disappointment. "They found me." The ship landed and a ramp extended. Soldiers in elegant armor marched out in perfect formation. At their head was a tall figure whose armor was more ornate than the others. He approached quickly, his face stern. "Your Majesty," he said, dropping to one knee. "We feared the worst. Are you harmed?" "I am well, Commander Lyrics," Celestera said, her voice suddenly formal, royal. "Thanks to the quick thinking and tactical expertise of Commander Jake Morrison of Earth." Lyrics stood and looked at Jake with undisguised suspicion. Jake was very aware that he was covered in dirt and dust, holding a detonator box and standing in the rubble of a building he had just blown up. "This human is a commander?" Lyrics asked doubtfully. "He is the reason I am alive," Celestera said firmly. "He provided tactical support, defensive strategies, and combat solutions that defeated the assassins. I would be dead without him." Jake wanted to correct her, to explain that he had just been making things up as he went along, but Celestera caught his eye and gave him a tiny shake of her head. She was protecting him somehow, and he needed to trust her. "I see," Lyric said, not sounding convinced. "We must get you to safety, Your Majesty. The assassins may have reinforcements." "Agreed," Celestera said. She turned to Jake. "Commander Morrison, you will accompany us. I wish to debrief you on the tactical situation personally. Actually, I should probably—" Jake started. "That was not a request." "Honey Commander," Celestera said, and there was steel in her voice now, the voice of someone who ruled 300 worlds. "You are coming with me." Lyrix's eyes narrowed at the nickname, but he said nothing. They were escorted onto the ship, which was even more impressive inside than outside. The walls seemed to glow with soft light, and the corridors were wide and clean. Crew members stopped and bowed as Celestera passed. They reached a medical bay where a doctor immediately began scanning Celestera. Jake stood awkwardly to the side while the doctor treated her injuries, speaking in a language he didn't understand. Lyrics watched him the entire time like he was a bomb that might explode. After the doctor finished, Celestara dismissed everyone except Jake and Lyrics. She sat on the medical bed, looking more regal despite her injuries and dust-covered armor. "Commander Lyrics," she said formally.
What is the status of the investigation?
"The assassins were hired by the Zrath Collective as we suspected," Lyrics reported. "But they had inside help. Someone in your own court provided your travel schedule and security protocols." Celestara's face hardened. "Do we know who?" "Not yet, Your Majesty. The investigation continues. Then I remain in danger even among my own people." Lyrics hesitated, then nodded. "It would be wise to trust no one until the traitor is identified." Celestara looked at Jake. "Commander Morrison saved my life multiple times over the past 2 days. He expects nothing in return, has shown no interest in politics or power, and has demonstrated loyalty and capability beyond question. I trust him." Jake felt his face heat up. "I'm not really—" "You are exactly what I say you are," Celestara interrupted. "Commander Lyrics, I am making Commander Morrison an official military advisor to the throne. He will have access to all security briefings and will remain by my side until this threat is resolved." Lyrics looked like he had swallowed something sour. "Your Majesty, with respect, he is a human. He has no knowledge of galactic politics, no understanding of our culture. He kept me alive when my own security failed," Celestara said coldly. "He used Earth tactics and thinking to defeat enemies that our standard protocols could not handle. His outside perspective is precisely what I need." "As you command," Lyric said stiffly. He bowed and left, shooting Jake one more suspicious look as he went. When they were alone, Jake turned to Celestara. "What are you doing?" "I can't be a military advisor. I don't know anything about your empire." "I am protecting you," Celestara said simply. "Lyrics is loyal, but he will investigate you thoroughly. When he discovers you truly are just a geologist, he will question why I kept you close. He might even suspect you of manipulating me. But I didn't. I know that. You know that. But galactic politics are vicious, Commander Jake. If I let you go now, if I dismiss you as unimportant, someone might use you to get to me. Or worse, someone might eliminate you to cover their tracks." She stood and walked to him. "By making you an official advisor, I give you protection, status, power. No one can touch you without going through me." 2 weeks passed aboard the flagship, and Jake felt more lost with each day. The ship was a city in space with thousands of crew members and enough corridors that he still got turned around. He had quarters that were bigger than his apartment back home, with a window that showed the stars sliding past as they traveled through space. But he was completely out of place. Celestara was immediately swept up in royal duties, meetings with advisors, diplomatic communications, security briefings. She tried to include him when she could, but Jake understood nothing about galactic politics. He sat in meetings where people discussed trade agreements and border disputes, nodding along and feeling like a fraud. Commander Lyrics had investigated him thoroughly, just as Celestara predicted. He had found exactly what Jake told them: a geologist from Earth with no military training, no political connections, and no apparent agenda. This somehow made Lyrics even more suspicious. "Why are you really here?" Lyrics asked him one day, cornering Jake in a corridor. "What do you want from the Queen?" "Nothing," Jake said honestly. "I just want to make sure she's safe." "No one wants nothing," Lyrics said. "Everyone has an agenda." Jake was starting to understand why Celestara had seemed so surprised when he treated her like a person instead of a position. In her world, apparently, genuine kindness was rare enough to be suspicious. The worst part was how little he saw Celestara. She was always in meetings, always surrounded by advisors and guards. When they did have a few minutes together, she looked exhausted. The formal mask she wore around her court was wearing on her. "I apologize for this, Commander Jake," she said one evening when they had a brief moment alone in the observation deck. "I had hoped to spend more time with you." "You're busy," Jake said. "I get it. You have an empire to run. An empire that is trying very hard to complicate my life," Celestara said with frustration. "The Council wants me to marry Prince Vector of the Zrath Collective to smooth over the diplomatic incident. Never mind that the Zrath hired the assassins. Politics must be served." Jake felt something cold in his chest. "You're getting married?" "They are suggesting it, strongly." Celestara looked out at the stars. "It would solve many problems. Unite two major powers. Prevent potential wars. It makes perfect strategic sense. Do you want to marry him? I have never met him. But my wants rarely factor into these decisions. She glanced at Jake. I am the queen. Sometimes that means sacrificing personal happiness for the good of my people. Jake didn't know what to say to that. What could he say? He was a geologist from Arizona. She was the queen of 300 worlds. Whatever connection they had built in the desert, whatever that kiss had meant, it couldn't compete with empires and politics. I should go, he said quietly. Back to Earth, I mean. You don't need a fake military advisor hanging around. You need real help, people who understand this world. Celestara turned to him sharply. Is that what you want? To leave? It's not about what I want, Jake said. It's about what makes sense. I don't belong here, Celestara. Everyone knows it. I'm just the guy who happened to be in the desert when you crashed. That doesn't make me qualified to be part of your life. You kept me alive, Celestara said intensely. You treated me with kindness when you had every reason to be angry. You made me laugh in the middle of danger. You saw me, Jake Morrison. The real me. Not the queen, not the position, just me. And that matters? Jake asked. In this world of politics and arranged marriages and people who all have agendas. Does that actually matter? Celestara looked at him for a long moment. I do not know, she admitted quietly. I am being told it should not. That I should be practical, strategic. That I should marry Prince Vector and unite our empires and forget about a geologist who makes me feel like a person instead of a crown. Maybe you should listen, Jake said, and it hurt to say it. Maybe that's the smart play. Since when have either of us made smart plays? Celestara asked with a sad smile. You ran at hunter ships with a pipe. I kissed a man I barely knew in the middle of a war zone. We are not good at being practical, honey commander. Jake wanted to argue, but she was right. Nothing about their time together had been practical or smart or strategic. It had just been real. What do we do? He asked. I do not know, Celestara said. But I have a council meeting in 10 minutes where they will pressure me to make a decision about the marriage alliance. So I suppose we will find out soon enough. She left and Jake stood alone in the observation deck watching the stars. He felt more lost than he ever had in the desert. At least there he understood the terrain. Here, he was completely out of his depth. He spent the next few hours walking the ship thinking. Eventually he found himself in the hangar bay, looking at the small shuttles and transport ships. One of them could take him back to Earth. He could leave right now, save Celestara the complication of explaining him to her council. Let her marry the prince and unite the empires and do what queens were supposed to do. It would be the smart thing, the practical thing, the thing that made sense. Jake was seriously considering it when alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed throughout the hangar. Crew members ran past him shouting orders. Something was wrong. He grabbed a passing officer. What's happening? Attack on the royal chambers, the officer said, pulling free. All hands to battle stations. Jake ran. He didn't think about it, didn't question it. He just ran toward where he knew the royal chambers were. Guards tried to stop him, but he pushed past them, and his advisor credentials got him through the security doors. The corridor outside Celestara's chambers was a disaster. Guards were down, injured or dead. Scorch marks covered the walls from energy weapons, and standing in the doorway, blocking entrance to the chambers, was Commander Lyrix, fighting 3 attackers in dark armor. Lyrix was skilled, but he was outnumbered. As Jake watched, one of the attackers landed a blow that sent Lyrix crashing into the wall. The 3 attackers turned toward the chambers, toward Celestara. Jake grabbed a fallen guard's weapon. He had no idea how to use it, but he pointed it at the attackers and fired. The shot went wild, hitting the ceiling, but it got their attention. Get away from her, Jake said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. The attackers looked at each other, then at Jake. One of them laughed. The pet human. This will be easy. They were right. Jake lasted maybe 10 seconds before they disarmed him and knocked him down. He tasted blood and felt pain explode in his ribs. One of them raised a weapon, pointing it at his head. Then Celestara was there. She moved like lightning, her armor back on, a weapon in each hand. She fought with fury and precision, and the attackers who had dismissed Jake as a pet suddenly found themselves facing a queen who was very, very angry. The fight was brief and brutal. When it ended, all 3 attackers were down, and Celestara was standing over them, breathing hard. She looked at Jake, her eyes wide with fear. You idiot, she said, dropping to her knees beside him. You could have been killed. You were in danger, Jake said, wincing at the pain in his ribs. Couldn't let that happen. You have no training, no weapons, no armor. You ran toward danger anyway. Yeah, I've been doing that a lot since I met you, Jake said. He coughed and tasted more blood. Probably should stop. Celestara touched his face gently, checking for injuries. Commander Lyrix told me something today. After his investigation, after watching us, he said you might be the most honest person he has ever met, that you have no agenda except my well-being, that you are either a perfect actor or genuinely just a good man. She smiled through tears. He concluded you were just a good man, and that I was a fool if I let you go. Lyrix said that? Jake asked, surprised. He did, just before he came to guard my chambers during the council meeting. Celestara looked at where Lyrix was being helped up by other guards. He suspected an inside attack. He was right. The traitor? Counselor Vex, my own uncle, Celestara said bitterly. He arranged everything. The assassins, the marriage alliance, this attack. He wanted me dead or controlled through an arranged marriage. Either way, he would have real power. Medical teams arrived, checking injuries. Jake was helped to his feet, his ribs wrapped. Celestara stayed close to him the entire time, her hand in his. Later, after things had calmed down, after her uncle had been arrested and the immediate danger had passed, Celestara came to Jake's quarters. She was out of her armor, wearing simple clothes. She looked tired but peaceful. The council met again, she said. I told them I would not marry Prince Vector. I told them I would marry whom I chose, when I chose, or not at all. Several members were very angry. That's going to cause problems, Jake said. Let it, Celestara said. I have spent 7 years being what everyone else needed me to be. Making sacrifices for the Empire. Putting duty above everything else. And today, someone who has known me for 2 weeks ran toward danger to protect me. Not because of duty or politics or strategy, just because he cared. She sat beside him on the bed. I have made a decision, Commander Jake Morrison. A very impractical one. What's that? I am giving myself permission to be happy. To choose someone who sees me as a person, not a position. To build something real instead of something strategic. She took his hand. I want to choose you, if you will have me. Jake looked at her violet eyes.